Hello guys, today we're going to be talking about the crit cap and how it's going to affect your damage, ways to get crit damage buffs, stuff like that. You know, everything that you probably need to know as a DD. Or I mean, you know, as a raid lead, whatever. There's a lot of applications for it, right? So we already talked about pen. Now we're moving on to crit cap, critical damage. So again, I'm using ESOresources.com. I fucking love this website. It's one of my favorite ones to use. It's giving me a whole list of sources of crit damage. There are a couple missing, and I think it's just because it's a little outdated. Probably just missing some things, but we can go over that here in a bit. Okay, so let's talk about like what this means, right? So critical damage, uh this is like the critical damage multiplier, I guess. You know, like okay, so a regular crit in ESO will do 50% added on to like the base damage, right? So let's say you're doing like 10 damage. Let's say that your base damage for like a light attack is 10. If that light attack that does 10 damage is a critical, which is like a you know, it's a, you know, it, let's just say it crits, right? So you're gonna add on half of it, so 50%, on top of the 10. So it would go from 10 to 15. The 15 would be the critical, the 10 would be the base. 50% is pretty low, but in ESO, the crit cap goes all the way up to 125%. There are ways to, you know, all of these things up here will boost your critical damage to get it up to 125%. So instead of 50%, you'd have to do 10 plus, you know, it would be like 22 point whatever, something like 22, 23, instead of the base 10, which is a lot. That's, you know, over double for that one attack that crit. In ESO, usually you're building for critical damage. You know, it's one of your most powerful stats. Pen would be the most powerful. Crit damage would be, you know, right below that, in my opinion. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, how do we get there? Well, first off, you know, the game gives us 50%. That's the base. You know, you're not getting any lower than that. You're always going to have 50%, but that's pretty low. So what can we do? Um, okay, so probably the most basic thing that you could say is medium armor. Most DDs these days, like in like every single raid that you're gonna do, pretty much, um, every DD is going to be in medium armor. And as we talked about in the pen video, actually, there's usually like 6 medium pieces and then 1 light, or maybe 7 medium. But just to play it conservatively, we'll go with 6 medium because that's, you know, what seems to be the normal these days. Okay, so that's giving us 12%, right? So 2% per medium piece. Bam, already 62, fantastic. And you don't even have to do anything but have medium armor on and put on medium armor passives. It's as easy as that. You know, obviously if you add one more piece in, you're gonna get 2% more. It's not a lot, and usually that one light piece is gonna be more beneficial. So let's just play conservatively and keep the 6. Okay. Kill, debatable. We'll talk about that later. We don't use axes anymore. Daggers on your front bar, or even, you know, bow front bar, or you know, lightning staff, whatever. We just don't use axes. It's not necessary. We can get to crit cap easily without having to have everybody in axes. Same thing with dual axe. Soulzan. Soulzan's actually really cool. Let's go ahead and look that up. Okay, Soulzan's Torment comes from Rockgrove. What does it do? Okay. When an enemy recently damaged dies, they leave behind a vengeful soul for 6 seconds. It's really blue and glowy and hard to grab. You can only create one vengeful soul at a time, blah, blah, blah. Touching the soul increases your critical chance by 2160. So that's like how we talked about before. Critical damage is uh a boost to the critical, but the critical chance is like the chance of a base attack actually doing a crit, right? So it's going to give you a ton of crit chance for one, and then it's going to boost your critical damage modifier by 12%. 12 is huge. In fights where you can use Soulzan and keep it up, it's actually really, really effective. Like, what comes to mind would be well, obviously, like Trash. Trash is really bursty as well, and you might not get as many like consistent everything else is in Trash. So having Souls in, really helps to reach cap and get more crits going. So fantastic set for short fights. Twins, DSR twins, like whenever a dog dies and you pick up the soul, whenever an Atro dies, whatever, stuff like that. You just keep picking up these souls and try to keep up the buff. It's really long times, 30 seconds. So as long as you get a soul, every 30 seconds, bam, you're fucking golden. It's huge. But not every fight is going to be good for Soulzan. So this is definitely not something that we can just rely on for our crit damage. So we're going to ignore it for now. But good set. Great set for Trash, mostly. Order's Wrath. This is a good one. Let's go ahead and just unclick the medium armor real quick. So Order's Wrath gives you 8%. You're not gonna be using this in raid, but for like beginner people, like this is a really good crafted set because, like I said, one of your most important things that we're building on in like DDing in ESO is trying to get your crit damage higher, as well as your penetration, your crit chance, all that stuff. We want to get those stats higher. That's what we're building for. So you got a beginner friend, give him some fucking Orders Wrath. That shit's insane. Okay, Backlight Gourmand, you don't use that. That's bad. Don't use that. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about Kilt real quick because I know that we just kind of skipped over it. So Kilt is 10% crit damage total. Let's go ahead and look that up. Kilt is something that we used to use a lot, but we don't really use too much anymore. For certain classes, it's actually meta, but it also depends on the fight. You can't just use it everywhere. Okay, let's look at this. Dealing direct damage grants you a stack of Hunter's Focus for 20 seconds, up to 10 stacks max. So you're pretty much always going to be keeping up 10 stacks of Kilt as long as you've built it up. You can only gain 1 stack per second. Each stack of Hunter's Focus increases your critical chance by 110 and your critical damage by 1%. So you're going to be getting like 1,000 crit chance added on, and then critical damage increased by 10% total. That's a lot. That's like Soulzan, pretty much. Like, just about. It's pretty good. But here is the bad part, right? Taking direct damage removes 5 stacks of Hunter's Focus, up to once per second. Removing it removes all stacks. Cool, you're not going to be removing it mid-fight. Taking direct damage removes 5 stacks. So you're basically just ruining Kilt whenever you take direct damage, and in some fights that's going to be like all of the time. So like Locust Seas would be a good fight to never run Kilt on. You don't want to do that. It's a bad idea. So like for classes who lack crit damage, and in fights where you can use it, like DK or Sork, things like that. Maybe Crow, yeah, like Crow, Sork, and DK, they do really well with Kilt because they don't have any like crit damage passives added into their class. So really, really good mythic for them to use, and it prevents you from having to do like backstabber or relying on other people's uptimes and shit. Very, very, very good. So let's go and click out of both of these, and let's go back. Okay, so let's go back to medium armor. We have that clicked, and we're gonna ignore everything else. Okay, so what next? The shadow. That's a Mundus, and then this I'm assuming is how many divines pieces that you're wearing. We don't use the shadow anymore. We use the thief on DD, so we're ignoring this. Malakats. Malakats you're not gonna be using in PvE content either. it reduces your crit damage to basically 0, or at least takes away the 50%, whatever. Not good. You're not going to be using that in PvE. Next up on the list, Khajiit. Okay, so Khajiit's cool, right? But it's not meta. We would prefer other things, like mainly Dark Elf is what we use these days. So let's go ahead and see how much it gives us. Okay, it's 12% for being a Khajiit. I know a couple people who, they're really into the RP. They really like the cat people and the tails. That's cool. Khajiit's actually not a very bad DD race. It's not terrible. It's just the fact that you get more damage out of not being a Khajiit and instead going into being a Dark Elf, because like I said before, there are ways to reach the cap without having it, and sometimes being over crit cap, like it's a cap for a reason, right? If you go past that 125%, it doesn't do anything. You can't get a 140% like critical hit. It's going to cap out at 125. Everything else that you add onto it is extra, and there are ways to get to 125 without being a Khajiit that end up resulting in more damage. So not very meta, but it's pretty cool. I would say for like solo content or maybe even dungeons, Khajiit's a really cool thing to have, just because like you're probably gonna be lacking, and like you're not gonna have catalysts probably in a dungeon. You're probably not gonna have the best major force sometimes in a dungeon, depending on what you're doing. Um, stuff like that. So it could be useful, but in raids like what we're talking about, probably not. It's not very great. You just go Dark Elf and don't worry about it. Advanced Species, this is for Warden DDs, and nobody plays Warden, so we're gonna completely ignore this. Yeah, Warden sucks. Warden bad. Okay. Templar and Nightblade. So Templars and Nightblades both get 10% crit damage built into their class just by existing. So it's literally just like a free 10% for both of them. That's huge, right? So that's like getting the kilt buff, but for free on both of those classes. The sad thing is nobody plays Nightblade anymore because it sucks. So Magplar or Stamplar is going to be the only people benefiting out of those. It's really helpful. For like, okay, you'll probably never have to slot Fighting Finesse. You'll probably never have to slot Backstabber. Um, you'll get all of these other raid buffs, and you will be fine. You won't have to do anything extra to hit your goal, right? You don't need kill. So then you can do other things on your Templar, like slot Valati Amulet or Mora's Whispers, and get more damage out, just because you've been given a little booster seat. So, if you're a Templar, fantastic day for you. You just get 10% free crit damage, just for being you. Okay, so let's hold off on the champion points. We'll get to that here in a minute. We'll talk about buffs and debuffs. And our guy Alec with K down here, he's given us a nice little list of common raid buffs and stuff like that you would find. So we'll talk about these, starting from the bottom, probably. Okay, so minor brittle. What is that? Let's take a peeky poo. I cannot type. Minor brittle ESO. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Okay, let's hope ESO hub doesn't lie to me. Okay, so start at the bottom. Frostbite. Bad set. You're never gonna wear it. It's not gonna be in raid. So don't even worry about that. Actually, let's talk about what it does first. Okay, minor brittle increases critical damage taken by 10%. Same thing as your little Templar buff here. Same thing as kill 10%. So, bam, huge, great. How do we get it? Okay, so it says on esohub.com that applying chilled while actively holding a frost staff now applies minor brittle in addition to its other effects. Note that the staff must be on your active bar when chilled is applied for this to proc. I'm pretty sure that there may be other things. But basically, you need to chill a thing, which means do like frost damage to it, and then have a frost staff equipped. So this is usually done by like your main tank. Main tanks these days usually have ice staff on their front and back bar, and they use Elissus to apply chilled, and they also have ice wall to proc blockade, as well as using clench as their taunt. So with all of these things just combined, you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of chilled, and you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of brittle. It's not that hard to keep up. But let's say that you're a really bad tank, right? Or some fucker in your raid team is really bad at literally just keeping up wall or fucking taunting the boss. Let's say he's just really bad at it. Okay, so here's colorless pool, right? Most groups these days have an Arcanist on their team. It's just kind of a thing that happens, and it's gonna go into next patch as well. So what you can do is use Rune of the Colorless Pool on a target to just put minor vuln and minor brittle on it, just guaranteed. And it's really easy to keep up because it's 20 seconds. Brittle is a lot shorter of a timer for everything else, and minor vuln is also pretty short if you're using like bugs or something like that. So really helpful. Like, let's say you want to have like an arc support, or maybe just even an arc DD if you don't mind too much. Just, put them on colorless pool, make sure that it's on the target, right? Just to guarantee uptimes. It's really easy to keep up, just like another dot for a DD. But yeah, no, minor brittle, 10% crit damage, huge. Shouldn't be a problem in your raid as long as your main tank isn't a fucking bozo. Or if they are, like I said, or even, let's say you want to have colorless pool and the main tank keep up brittle. Either way, you want to have this as close to 100% uptime as possible. Next on our list is going to be major brittle. So major brittle only comes, as far as I'm aware, only comes from Nunatak set from Imperial City, I believe. Okay, so increases critical damage taken by 20%. 20 is a huge number. That's a lot bigger than fucking minor brittle. Okay, so how does Nunatak work? It's a monster set, so it's gonna be on your head and shoulders. On dealing frost damage, create a 6-meter area under the target for 6 seconds, dealing frost damage to enemies every 1 second, and applying a 40% snare for 4 seconds. Okay, so you have to deal frost damage for this to work. Cool, that's not too bad. Enemies damaged 4 times become immobilized and afflicted with major brittle for 4 seconds, causing the target to take 20% increased critical damage. That's major brittle, yep. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds and scales out the higher of your weapon or spell damage. I don't know what that means. Probably what scales is the frost damage, not the buff. Okay, so afflicted with major brittle for 4 seconds, and the cooldown is every 15 seconds. It can happen. So what is that? That's like 4 out of 15 seconds. That's not a lot. That's a really bad uptime. Not very good. So using Nunatak on its own, you're gonna have a terrible time. Sure, 20% crit damage, that's a pretty big number. But if it's not a good uptime, let's go ahead and take a peek here. I'll explain this to you, right? So, okay, what is 4 divided by 15? Because I'm stupid. 26%? Okay, cool. Thank you, Google. Okay, so let's say we're just using Nunatak on its own, and it's about like a 26% uptime. Okay, fantastic. How much of a crit damage increase do you think that would be? 5%. That's what you might think to yourself. Wait a minute, bucko. I thought Major Brittle was 20% crit damage. Yeah, but the uptime shit, right? So, you're only going to be getting like 5% out of it. It's not great. It's terrible. Like minor brittle alone is, having that is better than like double better than this shitty uptime. So how do you make it better? Okay, let's talk about that. You know what? We'll type in 100. Okay, we're looking at not Nunatak. Sorry, Nazare. ESO. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Okay, so Nazare is also a monster set, right? So that means in your raid comp, if you're using Nunatuk, you're gonna have to sacrifice 2 monster sets on 2 different people to get your major brittle. Okay, so Nazare, what does it do? When you use an ultimate ability like Horn or Glyphic or Barrier, whatever, doesn't matter. When you use an ultimate ability, closest 6 enemies within 12 meters have all major debuffs and minor debuffs. So minor brittle, major brittle, whatever, applied to them, extended by 1 second per 20 ultimate spent. 500 divided by 20, what is that? 500 divided by 20, 25. Yeah, baby, 25 seconds. Okay, cool. Extended by 1 second per 20 ultimates spent. This effect can occur once every 30 seconds per target. Okay, so we take our base 4 out of 15 and we extend it with a full ult Nazare to get 25 plus the previous 4 seconds. So 29 out of 15 is what you're going to get. So, okay, you might say, hey, Mr. Temp, that's a full uptime. You're sure goddamn right. But hear me out. You can't just 500 ult Nazare all the time. You have to build up that ultimate. And most of the time, let's say it's a long fight. You have to build a lot of ultimate to get that full extension out, the 25 seconds. You can use a horn at 250 ult instead of 500. So let's say what is 250 divided by 20? What we get there? 12.5. Let's round it up just to be, forgiving, right? So 13 seconds. 13 plus the 4 is 17 out of the 15-second cooldown. That's also a full uptime, but you also have to think about the cooldown, the 30-second cooldown. So 17 seconds, that just doesn't work, right? Like you're not getting it to last 30 seconds. It doesn't really work like that. So you're not going to be able to go into a fight and just major brittle with Nunatuk and then Nazare extend it on cooldown. You're not going to be able to do that. So don't do that. So if you can't do that, then what are some examples of like where to use this? Okay, so one option would be the snake boss in Rockgrove, or let's say Sunspire Dragons, right, where it's bursty and you don't need a full up time. Let me go ahead and just show you real quick Rockgrove logs. Okay, this group, I know this group did it. This group was Killing Snake. Baskin Snakes. Oh yeah, baby. Let's check out their fastest pull. 14 seconds. They had Nunatuk on Miss Tag here. She's so lovely. And she was using colorless pool probably to proc the frost. Or yeah, yep, I bet that's what she was doing. Probably colorless pool. Unless I'm crazy. Unless I'm absolutely insane. Okay, so let's go take a peek. Now, hear me out. They doesn't look like they had a Nazare extend, but they don't really need to. Let's take a look at the damage done to Baskin Snakes. Okay, yeah. So they probably would have like actually started killing him at like right here and on. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at the debuffs. We're looking for a major brittle. Basks in snakes, baby. Let's take a look. What we got? Nunatuk? No, that's not what we're looking for. Major brittle. Okay, so major brittle 50%. So here's the problem. Okay, so it was only like a 50% uptime of it, and it was only at like the ass end of the fight because it took a while to proc. That's pretty shitty. Not sure I would have liked that, but that's just what they chose to do. It could be an option for short fights like this. Just keep in mind it takes at least 4 seconds to proc, and it's gonna be, only a 4-second uptime anyway. It's not gonna be very great. So, can't help you out there. Let's go ahead and take a peeky poo. I told you dragons and Sunspire. That's what I said. So let's take a peeky poo here. Where's the previous world record here? Healer mains on EU. Let's go take a look at their Yolnakrin because I know they used it here. Okay, so they had this Necro healer in Nunatak, and I assume this is an ice wall that they use to proc it every time, right? And then they had their off damage, off heal type guy, Sir Loki, on an Arcanist. He was using Nazare to extend it. That was their combo, right? The Nunatak paired with a Naz extend. Okay, so one of the things about dragons is if we look at the damage done to them, you'll see it's phasal. I don't know if that's a real word, but you get what I mean. It's in phases, so I call it phasal. Okay, so this lasted about like 30 seconds ish. Let's try to zoom in really, really quick. Or not quick, sorry. Really exact. That's how I want to go. Okay, very cool. Yeah, it's about 30 seconds, I would say. Like just about. Okay. So they're probably going into this with like a full alt Nazare, and let's go ahead and check the debuffs here. So let's just say a phase of Yolnakrin being on the ground takes 30 seconds. And we want to look at the Major Brittle on him. There's the Nunatak proc. Am I crazy? There it is. Okay, cool. Major Brittle. Bam, 84%, baby. Look at that. See, it took 4 seconds to proc, just about, like 4 to 5 seconds to proc. But, once it procced, they were able to Naz extend it and make it last for the rest of the Yolnakrin phase. They did this every single land phase, and they got roughly like, let's say 84 to 80, in that range, maybe 75 to 85 of time of Major Brittle, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good. If we go back to our crit calculator, 84% is what that said. So let's drop this down. How much of a damage buff is this now? Going from 50 to 67. So you're only missing 3% crit damage. That's a lot fucking better than if you never used the Naz extend. Now the good thing about phasal fights like this is, let's go ahead and back out real quick. You don't need to have the uptime the entire fight. You remember how I said you're not going to be able to Naz extend Nunatak for like the entirety of a fight? Like if they tried to keep up Nunatak for the entire like 254 that this took, no fucking way. It's not going to happen. There is no way that you're going to be able to do that without losing damage. It just doesn't work. So the good thing about like phasal fights here is you can use that Nunatak and the Nazare and get what you want. It's effective. So be smart with how you use that. Be smart with your raid comp. Use it in places where it makes sense. I beg you, don't fuck your raid team over. Okay, next up on the list is E-Catalyst. That stands for Elemental Catalyst. So let's go ahead and look that up next. Elemental Catalyst, ESO. Back to ESO Hub we go. They should sponsor me, or I should sponsor them. I don't know how that works. Okay. Whenever you deal flame, shock, or frost damage, you apply a stack of flame, shock, or frost weakness to the enemy for 3 seconds. So this would go good on Necro, is what we already use it on. There's you know, I've seen it been used on Sork or whatever, but the easiest class to use it on at the moment is Necro. Just because you can do Flame with like Wall, and then Shock with Mystic Siphon, and Frost with Unnerving Boneyard. So each stack of an elemental weakness increases their critical damage taken by 5%. So that's a critical damage buff for you, debuff for them. Enemy can only have one stack of each elemental weakness at a time. Yep. Okay, so there are 3 weaknesses, and they each do 5%. So in total, that's going to be 15% crit damage buff for you. Okay. Or it's not a buff, it's a debuff on the target that it's applied to. So, bam. As you can see, 15%. Great. Lovely. This is usually going to be in like, you know, almost every fight that you're going to be doing. Unless you're going with Nunatuck, right? There are ways to get to crit cap with just Nunatuck and a couple of other things, and you can drop Catalyst, right? That way your Crow can do whatever he wants. I don't know how that changes next patch, but that's something that we do now. But you know, most groups just tend to go with an EC Crow to play it safe. But hear me out. Real quick, I'm gonna go take a peeky poo at some logs for some stuff. I just recently got a PB Planesbreaker in a different Discord in Purple Button Horde with Sarah the S. Let's go take a peeky poo at the Oaks. So we're just gonna be looking at each of the uptimes for Catalyst. So where are we? Okay, flame weakness was 80%. That scares me a little bit. 80%. That's not 100, you might say. That's crazy. Okay, so there's one. Where is the next one? Shock. What? Oh, 53. Okay. Did I miss one, guys? Where's Frost at? Oh, here it is. Okay, 92. Okay, so 92, 80, and the 53. I don't know how to do the math on that, but I know it's not 100. So we'll just drop it down to like 70% because that's, you know, we'll be generous and we'll say 75%, right? So it, instead of being 15% total, this now gets dropped down to 11. So you're missing out on 4%. It's not a lot, but you know, as we talked about before, you know, all of these things can add up. All of these like lack of uptimes can add up, and it really just hurts your damage. We'll keep that there, and let's go ahead and just imagine that minor brittle wasn't kept up very well by your tank, and we'll go 75% there as well, and then we'll hold this. Okay, minor force. Okay, so let's take a peeky poo at that next. Minor force, ESO, increases critical damage by 10%. Well, why, thank you, Google. I appreciate that. Okay, well, would you look at that? There's a lot of ways to get fucking minor force. It's crazy. Okay, so accelerate, and it's morphs channel acceleration every against time. We don't really use those anymore, so wouldn't worry about it. Guard, your DDs aren't just gonna be sliding guard, so wouldn't worry about it. Trap beast and its morphs, barb trap and lightweight beast trap. This is how we keep up minor force at the moment. It's one of your options, right? So literally just keeping up barb trap is going to keep up your force. This is going away next patch because barb trap is getting nuked, so wouldn't hold on to that. But currently, that's what we would do is DDs would keep up barb trap and they would get minor force. Howl of Despair, that sucks. Werewolf sucks. We don't use werewolf. Bad set, 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 bad set. Actually, Stockman's is pretty good, but Valati is what we're interested in, right? We actually talked about Valati in the pen video because it gives you just like a fucking fat line of 1650 pen. That's huge. But as well as that, it also will just always give you minor force, just for no reason. Just it will always give it to you. So one of the things that we do these days is we just have all of our DDs wearing Velati, just to make things simple. That way they don't have to, run trap, keep up their minor force, just one less thing to worry about, and they're not losing too much damage by doing this. I think even next patch, DDs are probably just all gonna be in Velati, like every single one of them. I'm pretty sure, just because trap getting nuked. So, I mean, I don't know. Put the Velati on, get minor force all the time. Seems like a good deal to me. That's 100% uptime of minor force, and that's just 10% for free. Same thing as brittle. Um, okay, so the one of the last things on our list to talk about would be major force. Uh, Major force is going to be 20% crit damage, so double minor force. 20% is huge. Like I said before with Nanotech, it's really, really, really huge. It's so much. So where do we get that? Bad set, bad set. Perfected sacks and sacks are the same thing. So it comes from sacks. We don't use lights champion, that's bad, and aggressive horn. So the two places that you're gonna get major force from are horn and sacks. This isn't really up to the DDs. There's not much you can really do about it. This is more of a raid lead thing, or like a support ulting on time type thing. So your raid lead's job, in addition to telling you not to die and to do damage, their job is to call ults in a way that benefits the team, or get like an ulti order set up, something. They need to get you good uptimes of major force. That is their job. So how long is this? Major force when you horn for 10 seconds. That's not a lot of time. You're not going to be able to, like, one person is not going to be able to horn uh once every 10 seconds. So you're gonna need to have probably multiple, or there's other things. Let's take a look at sacks real quick. When you use an ultimate ability while in combat, you and up to 11 group members within 28 meters of you gain major force for 1 second per ultimate, or 15 ultimate spent. So let's do the math on that. 500 divided by 15 is 33.3. Let's round it down to 33. When you use a 500 sacks ult, everybody on the team gets 33 seconds of force. That's great. That's huge. That's a long time. That makes a lot of time for another horn to go out. So that's your raid lead's job. They need to find a way to call horns and maybe like Sax Colossus, Sax Glyphics, barriers, whatever. Call it in a way that gets a good uptime. I'm not going to explain that. That's probably a YouTube video for another day. But if you have bad major force uptimes, blame your raid lead. It's all their fault. 20% though. It's fucking huge. Okay, so let's go ahead and add all this up. But let's imagine that it's like 100% value, right? So what did we talk about? Medium armor. Cool. Minor brittle. Cool. Catalyst. Minor force. Major force. We're ignoring the major brittle from Nanatak for a minute. Okay. So with all of these things that we have just clicked on, we have 117% crit damage. Like we talked about before, the crit cap is 125. So we're not quite there yet. We have to do more things. I will tell you, uh, remember how I told you before that this website's missing a couple things? The main thing that we're worried about here, since everybody plays Arcanist, is there's an Arcanist passive that actually gives you crit damage, close to 100% uptime. Pretty sure it is 100% uptime. Should be Fated Fortune. Okay, Warp Fate, when you generate or consume Crux, increases your critical damage and critical healing by 12% for 7 seconds. This is a unique buff. Same thing as like the Templar or the Nightblade thing, except for instead of 10%, it's 12, which is even better. Great. So when you generate or consume crux, that's going to be like every time that you flail and every time that you beam, which is literally always. So you should never have to worry about Fated Fortune being active. So let's just pretend that you're an Arc DD, and we'll go ahead and just bam, Templar Nightblade, bam. Uh, there you go. If you're a Templar or an Arcanist, you don't have to do anything else. You're at cap. You have reached it with 2% extra to spare. Okay. So what do other people do if you're not an Arcanist? Okay. Let's talk about that. So your options are, like we said before, Kilt will get you there. Same thing as the 10% buff here. But okay, let's say you can't use Kilt. Okay, well Backstabber is 10%, right? Well, oh my, you might say, well, goddamn, fucking Mr. Temp, what if I can't backstab a dragon, right? You have to stand in front of the dragons in Sunspire, stuff like that. Well, okay, fighting finesse. That's gonna be just about your best friend, right? Let's say you're a DK using Velati and you can't use Kilt. You're obviously not a Templar if you're DK, right? So fighting finesse, that's gonna be your little helper. Fighting finesse is, I think, 8%. Uh, So you're gonna reach cap with that, but as you can see, this requires 100% uptime of all of these things. You are not going to get 100% uptime. You're just not. Um, Whether that be your raid lead's fault or your EC Crow's fault or whatever, you're probably not gonna be there. So let's go ahead and take a peeky poo at more logs, because we just looked at some. Let's look at the same log, actually, because that would be interesting. Okay, so we're going to add up realistic uptimes. This is a 3-minute Oaks hard mode from the Planesbreaker that I was in. Here's me, Temp. So what are we looking for? The DDs had Velathion, so 100%, they had that. We were talking about like roughly 75%. I don't know the actual math. We're just taking a little guesstimate here. We're losing 4% crit damage from that. Minor Brittle. Let's specifically target Oaks when we go into debuffs. But Major Force, how much was that? It says 92. I don't believe that to be accurate. Yeah, it's not. Ignore that. So on everybody else that mattered, like 70% Major Force. Okay. And then now we can go into debuffs and we can check out the Minor Brittle. Specifically on Oaks. That's what we want to look at. Minor Brittle, 92%. Pretty good. Pretty close to 100. Keep in mind, we didn't have an Arcanist running colorless pool. This is just the main tank keeping it up. So me, teehee, it was me. I'm the main tank. Could have done better, but it's okay. So now that we have dropped our uptimes, we are down to an average crit damage of 114. And this is with fighting finesse as well. Like, even adding fighting finesse, we're still not quite at crit cap by like 11%. That's huge. Wouldn't you say that's a problem, right? So, like, if our max is 125 and we're losing out on 11% just purely based on uptimes, that's pretty fucking shitty. So yeah, tell your raid lead to get better at calling Major Force. Tell your EC Crow to quit being shit and actually do Catalyst. Tell your main tank to actually keep up Brittle. And then, once all those things have been taken care of, have fighting finesse if you need it, if it's necessary. Like I said before, if you're an Arcanist, here, you actually, so here's the funny thing. If you're an Arcanist, and you don't have fighting finesse, like probably most of the DDs in this group were not using fighting finesse, I'm sure. They just went into this with 116% crit damage. So they as well, not even other classes, just everybody, they're down by quite a bit. This is 4, 5, 9%. That's quite a bit. Fighting finesse would pretty much get you to cap. Now I know what it says. I know it says that you're gonna be like max crit damage above 135. Like, I get it, but we don't have max uptimes, right? So maybe not, take a look at your buffs in raid. Take a look at your buffs and debuffs. Do that research yourself. See if maybe it would be worth it to slot fighting finesse, because I've said this before probably plenty of times. Your two most important stats are going to be penetration and crit damage. So if you're not reaching crit cap consistently, that's something that you definitely need to look into. That's something that needs to be fixed. Whether it be, like I said before, tell your raid lead to call ultis better. See if there's anything you can do to fix that. Tell your EC Crow to do better catalyst. Tell your main tank to keep a better brittle. Find ways to get these uptimes up. Find ways to get your crit damage to 125 or as close to it as you can get. Yes, that is probably all I have to talk about today. I don't think there's anything else to really cover. I hope this starts a revolution. I hope that all raid leads get fired from their jobs and DDs start sliding fighting finesse more often. So, thank you guys for watching. I know this was a fucking long ass video, but it's not my fault. Game's complicated. Gotta do what you gotta do. So, thank you for watching. Goodbye.